Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the next episode of the Seal Nectar. This episode will be going through the second part of the world before the Prophet, and we will be looking at the rulership and princeship among the Arabs. And then after this, we will go on to the lineage of the Prophet, his birth, etc. So, inshallah, we're gonna get right into it. So, rulership and princeship among the Arabs. When talking about the Arabs before Islam, we deem it necessary to draw a mini picture of the history of rulership, princeship, and sectarianism and the religious denominations of the Arabs, so as to facilitate the understanding of emergent circumstances when Islam appeared. When the sun of Islam rose, rulers of Arabia were of two kinds: crowned kings, who were in fact not dependent, and heads of tribes and clans, who enjoyed the same authorities and privileges possessed by crowned kings, and were mostly independent, though some of whom could have shown some kind of submission to a crowned king. The crowned kings were only those of Yemen, Heerah, and Ghassan. All other rulers of Arabia were non-crowned. Rulership in Yemen. The folks of Sheba were one of the oldest nations of the pure Arabs who lived in Yemen. Excavations at Ur brought to light their existence 25 centuries BC. Their civilization flourished and their domain spread 11 centuries BC. It is possible to divide their ages according to the following estimation. 1. The centuries before 650 BC, during which their kings were called Makrib Sheba. Their capital was Sarwa, also known as Khriba. Those ruins lie in a spot a day's walk from the western side of Ma'rib. During this period, they started building the Dam of Ma'rib, which had great importance in the history of Yemen. Sheba was also said to have so great a domain that they had colonies inside and outside Arabia. From 650 BC until 115 BC, during this era, they gave up the name Makrib and assumed the designation of kings of Sheba. They also made Ma'rib their capital instead of Sarwa. The ruins of Ma'rib lie at a distance of 60 miles east of Sana'a. From 115 BC until 300 AD, during this period, the tribe of Himyar conquered the kingdom of Sheba and took Redan for capital instead of Ma'rib. Later on, Redan was called Zifar. Its ruins still lie on Mudawwar mountain near the town of Yarim. During this period, they began to decline and fall. Their trade failed to a very great extent, firstly because of the Nabatean domain over the north of Hijaz. Secondly, because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria, and the north of Hijaz. And thirdly, because of the intertribal warfare. Thanks to the three above-mentioned factors, families of Qahtan were disunited and scattered out. From 300 AD until Islam dawned on Yemen, this period witnessed a lot of disorder and turmoil. The Great Many and civil wars rendered the people of Yemen liable to foreign subjection and hence loss of independence. During this era, the Romans conquered Aden and even helped the Abyssinians, i.e. the Ethiopians, to occupy Yemen for the first time in 340 AD, making the use of constant intra-tribal conflict of Hamdan and Himyar. The Abyssinian-Ethiopian occupation of Yemen lasted until 378 AD, whereafter Yemen regained its independence. Later on, cracks began to show in Ma'rib Dam, which led to the Great Flood, which happened in 450 or 451 AD, mentioned in the Noble Quran. This was a great event which caused the fall of the entire Yemeni civilization and the dispersal of the nations living therein. In 523, I believe AD, Dhu Nawas, a Jew, dispatched a great campaign against the Christians of Najran in order to force them to convert to Judaism. Having refused to do so, they were thrown alive into a big ditch where a great fire had been set. The Quran referred to this event, قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ, which is in Surah Al-Buruj. Cursed were the people of the ditch. This aroused great wrath among the Christians, and especially the Roman emperors, who not only instigated the Abyssinians, the Ethiopians, against Arabs, but also assembled a large fleet which helped the Abyssinian army of 70,000 warriors to effect a second conquest of Yemen in 525 AD under the leadership of Heerah, who was granted rulership over Yemen, a position held until he was assassinated by one of his army leaders, Abraha, who, after reconciliation with the king of Abyssinia, took rulership over Yemen, and later on deployed his soldiers to demolish Al-Kaaba, and hence he and his soldiers came known as the Men of the Elephant. And this is obviously covered in Surah Al-Fil that we have all memorized, inshallah. After the elephant incident, the people of Yemen, under the leadership of Madikarib bin Saif bu Yazin al-Himyari, and through Persian assistance, revolted against the Abyssinian invaders, restored independence, and appointed Madikarib as their king. It's Ma'adikarib as their king. However, Ma'adikarib was assassinated by an Abyssinian he used to have him around for service and protection. The family of Dhu Yazin was thus deprived of royalty forever. Kisra, the Persian king, appointed a Persian ruler over Sana'a and thus made Yemen a Persian colony. Persian rulers maintained rulership of Yemen until Badhan, the last of them, embraced Islam in 638 AD, thus terminating the Persian domain over Yemen. So now we move on to the rulership of Heerah. So we first looked at how the rulership was like in Yemen, and next we'll see what the rulership was like in Heerah. So ever since Korosh the Great, between 557 and 529 BC, united the Persians, they ruled Iraq and its neighborhood. Nobody could shake off their authority until Alexander the Great vanquished their king Dara I and thus subdued the Persians in 326 BC. Persian lands were thenceforth divided and ruled by kings known as the kings of sects, an era which lasted until 230 AD. Meanwhile, the Qahtanians occupied some Iraqi territories and were later followed by some Adnanians who managed to share some parts of Mesopotamia with them. The Persians, under the leadership of Ardashir, who had established the Sasanian state in 226 AD, regained enough unity and power to subdue the Arabs living in the vicinity of their kingdom and force Quda'a to leave for Syria, leaving the people of Heerah and Anbar under the Persian domain. During the time of Ardashir, Juzayma al-Wadda exercised rulership over Heerah, Rabi'a and Mudar and Mesopotamia. Ardashir had reckoned that it was impossible for him to rule the Arabs directly and prevent them from attacking his borders unless he had appointed as king one of them who enjoyed support and power of his tribe. He had also seen that he could make use of them against the Byzantine kings who always used to harass him. At the same time, the Arabs of Iraq could face the Arabs of Syria, who were in the hold of Byzantine kings. However, he deemed it fit to keep a Persian battalion under command of the king of Heerah to be used against those Arabs who might rebel against him. After the death of Juzaima around 268 AD, Amr bin Adi bin Nasr al-Lakhmi was appointed as king by the Persian king Sabur bin Ardashir. Amr was the first of the Lakhmi kings who ruled Heerah until the Persians appointed Qabaz bin Fayruz, in whose reign appeared someone called Mazdak, who called for dissoluteness in social life. Qabaz and many of his subjects embraced Mazdak's religion and even called upon the king of Heerah, al-Munzir bin Ma' as-Sama' to follow after. When the latter, because of his pride and self-respect, rejected their orders, Qabaz discharged him and nominated Harith bin Amr bin Hajar bin al-Kindi, who had accepted the Mazdaki doctrine. So this is something different to the normal practice of Islam. No sooner did Kisra Anu Shairwan succeed Qabaz than he, due to hatred of Mazdak's philosophy, killed Mazdak and many of his followers, restored Munzir to the throne of Heerah, and gave orders to summon under arrest Harith, who sought refuge with Al-Kalb tribe, where he spent the rest of his life. Sons of al-Munzir bin Ma'a as-Sama' maintained kinship a long time until an-Nu'man bin al-Munzir took over. Because of a clumsy born by Zayd bin Adi al-Abadi, the Persian king got angry with an-Nu'man and summoned him to his palace. An-Nu'man went secretly to Hani bin Mas'ud, chief of the Shayban tribe, and left his wealth and family under the latter's protection, and then presented himself before the Persian king, who immediately threw him into prison, where he perished. Kisra then appointed Iyas bin Qubaysa al-Atta'i as king of Heerah. Iyas was ordered to tell Hani bin Mas'ud to deliver an-Nu'man's charge up to Kisra. No sooner than had the Persian king received the fanatically motivated rejection on the part of the Arab chief, he declared war against the tribe of Shayban and mobilized his troops and warriors under the leadership of King Iyas to a place called Biqar, which witnessed a most furious battle wherein the Persians were severely routed by the Arabs for the first time in history. That was very soon after the birth of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, 8 months after Iyas bin Qubaysa's rise to the power over Heerah. After Iyas, a Persian ruler was appointed over Heerah, but in 632 AD, the authority there returned to the family of Lukhum, when al-Munzir al-Marur took over. Hardly had the latter's reign lasted for 8 months when Khalid bin al-Walid fell upon him with Muslim soldiers. So that was the rulership in Heerah. So rulership in geographical Syria. In the process of the tribal emigrations, some sects of Quda'a reached the borders of Syria, where they settled down. They belonged to the family of Sulay bin Halwan, of those whose offspring were the sons of Duj'am bin Sulay, known as Ad-Dujaima. Since such septs of Quda'a were used by the Byzantines in the defense of the Byzantine borders against both Arab Bedouin raiders and the Persians, and enjoyed autonomy for a considerable phase of time, which is said to have lasted for the whole 2nd century AD. One of their most famous kings was Zayd bin al-Habula. Their authority, however, came to an end upon defeat by the Ghassanides, who were consequently granted the proxy rulership over the Arabs of Syria, and had Dumat al-Jandal as their headquarters, which lasted until the Battle of Yarmouk in the year 13 AH. Their last king, Jabala bin Ayhum, embraced Islam during the reign of the chief of believers, Umar bin Khattab. So, finally, we have the rulership in Hijaz. Ismail alayhi salam administered authority over Mecca as well as custodianship of the holy sanctuary throughout his lifetime. Upon his death at the age of 137, wow, two of his sons, Nabet and Qidar, succeeded him. Later on, their maternal grandfather, Mudad bin Amr al-Jurhumi, took over, thus transferring rulership over Mecca to the tribe of Jurhum, preserving a venerable position through very little authority for Ismail's sons due to their father's exploits in building the holy sanctuary, a position they held until the decline of the tribe of Jurhum shortly after the rise of Bukhtanasar. The political role of the Adnanides had begun to gain firmer ground in Mecca, which could be clearly attested by the fact that upon Bukhtanasar's first invasion of the Arabs in Vati Iraq, the leader of Arabs was not from Jurhum. Upon Bukhtanasar's second invasion in 587 BC, however, the Adnanides were frightened out to Yemen, while Burmiya and Nabi fled to Syria with Ma'ad. But when Bukhtanasar's pressure lessened, Ma'ad returned to Mecca to find none of the tribe of Jurhum except Jursham bin Jalhama, whose daughter Mu'ana was given to Ma'ad as wife, who later had a son by him named Nizar. On account of the difficult living conditions and destitution prevalent in Mecca, the tribe of Jurhum began to ill-treat visitors of the holy sanctuary and extort its funds, which aroused resentment and hatred of the Adnanides, sons of Bakr bin Abd Munaf bin Kinana, who, with the help of the tribe of Khuza'ah that had come to settle in a neighboring area called Mar az-Zahran, invaded Jurhum and frightened them out of Mecca, leaving rulership to Qudaa in the middle of the 2nd century AD. So some of these places were actually mentioned in episode 1, and now we're seeing what is happening in those places. So just keep an eye out on that. Upon leaving Mecca, Jurhum filled up the well of Zamzam, leveled its place, and buried a great many things in it. Amr bin al-Harith bin Mudad al-Jurhumi was reported by Ibn Ishaq, the well-known historian, to have buried 2 gold deer together with the black stone, as well as a lot of jewelry and swords in Zamzam prior to the sorrowful escape to Yemen. Ismail's epoch is estimated to have lasted for 20 centuries BC, which means that Jurhum stayed in Mecca for 21 centuries and held rulership there for about 20 centuries. Upon the defeat of Jurhum, the tribe of Khuza'ah monopolized rulership over Mecca. Mudar tribes, however, enjoyed 3 privileges. The first, leading pilgrims from Arafat to Muzdalifah and then from Mina to the Aqaba stoning pillar. This was the authority of the family of Al-Ghawth bin Murrah, one of the septs of Ilyas bin Mudar, who were called Sofa. The privilege meant that the pilgrims were not allowed to throw stones at Al-Aqaba until one of the Sofa men did that. When they had finished stoning and wanted to leave the valley of Mina, Sofa men stood on the 2 sides of Al-Aqaba, and no one could pass that position until the men of Sofa passed and cleared the way for the pilgrims. When Sofa perished, the family of Sa'ad bin Zayd Manat from the Tamim tribe took over. The second is Al-Afada, leaving for Mina after Muzdalifah on sacrifice morning, and this was the responsibility of Adwan. The third privilege was the deferment of the sacred months, and this was the responsibility of the family of Tamim bin Adi from Bani Kinana. Khuza'a's reign in Mecca lasted for 300 years, during which the Adnanites spread all over Najd and the sides of Bahrain and Iraq, while small septs of the Quraysh remained on the sides of Mecca. They were Halul, Harum, and some families of Kinana. They enjoyed no privileges in Mecca or in the sacred house until the appearance of Qusay bin Kilab, whose father is said to have died when he was still a baby, and whose mother was subsequently married to Rabi'a bin Haram from the tribe of Bani Udra. Rabi'a took his wife and her baby to his homeland on the borders of Syria. When Qusay became a young man, he returned to Mecca, which was ruled by Halil bin Habsha from Khuza'a, who gave Qusay his daughter Huba as wife. After Halil's death, a war between Khuza'a and Quraysh broke out and resulted in Qusay's taking hold of Mecca and the sacred house. And now we will go into the reasons of why this war happened in the first place, and it's been illustrated into 3 versions. The first version is, having noticed the spread of his offspring, increase of his property, and exalt of honor after Halil's death, Qusay found himself more entitled to shoulder responsibility of rulership over Mecca and custodianship of the sacred house than the tribes of Khuza'a and Bani Bakr. He also advocated that Quraysh were the chiefs of Ismail's descendants. Therefore, he consulted some men from Quraysh and Kinana concerning his desire to evacuate Khuza'a and Bani Bakr from Mecca. They took a liking to his opinion and supported him. The second was that Khuza'a claimed that Halil requested Qusay to hold custodianship of Al-Kaaba and rulership over Mecca after his death. And the third was that Halil gave the right of Al-Kaaba service to his daughter Hubba and appointed Abu Rabshan al-Khuza'i to function as her great agent whereof. Upon Halil's death, Qusay bought this right for a leather bag of wine, which aroused dissatisfaction among the men of Khuza'a, and they tried to keep the custodianship of the sacred house away from Qusay. The latter, however, with the help of Quraysh and Kinana, managed to take over and even to expel Khuza'a completely from Mecca. Whatever the truth may have been, the whole affair resulted in deprivation of Safa of their privileges previously mentioned, evacuation of Khuza'a and Bakr from Mecca, and transfer of the rulership over Mecca and custodianship of the holy sanctuary to Qusay. After fierce wars between Qusay and Khuza'a inflicting heavy casualties on both sides, reconciliation and then arbitration of Ya'mur bin Auf from the tribe of Bakr, whose judgment entailed eligibility of Qusay's rulership over Mecca and custodianship of the sacred house, Qusay's irresponsibility for the Khuza'a's bloodshed, and imposition of blood money on Khuza'a. Qusay's reign over Mecca and the sacred house began in 440 AD and allowed him and Quraysh afterwards to absolute rulership over Mecca and undisputed custodianship of the sacred house, to which Arabs from all over Arabia came to pay homage. Qusay brought his kinspeople to Mecca and allocated it to them, allowing Quraysh some dwellings there, and Nus'a, the families of Sawfan, Adwan, Murrah bin Auf, preserved the same rights they used to enjoy before his arrival. A significant achievement credited to Qusay was the establishment of An-Nadwa House, an assembly house, on the northern side of Al-Kaaba Mosque, to serve as a meeting place for Quraysh. This very house had benefited Quraysh a lot because it secured unity of opinions amongst them and cordial solution to their problem. Qusay, however, enjoyed the following privileges of leadership and honor: presiding over An-Nadwa House meetings where the consultations relating to serious issues were conducted and marriage contracts were announced. The standard: He monopolized in his hand issues relevant to war launching, doorkeeping of Al Kaaba. He was the only eligible person to open its gate and was responsibility for its service and protection. Providing water for the pilgrims. This means that he used to fill basins sweetened by dates and raisins for the pilgrims to drink. Feeding pilgrims. This means making food for pilgrims who could not afford it. Qusay even imposed on Quraysh annual land tax paid by the season of pilgrimage for food. It is noteworthy that Qusay singled out Abd al-Manaf, a son of his, for honor and prestige, though he was not his elder son, Abd-ad-Dar was, who Abd-ad-Dar was, and entrusted him with such responsibilities as sharing of a Nadwa house, the standard, the doorkeeping of a Kaaba, providing water, food, and for pilgrims. Due to the fact that Qusay's deeds were regarded as unquestionable and his orders inviolable, his death gave no rise to conflict among his sons, but it later did among his grandchildren. For no sooner than Abd al-Manaf had died, his sons began to have rows with their cousins, sons of Abd-ad-Dar, which would have given rise to dissension and fighting among the whole Arab tribe of Quraysh had it not been for a peace treaty whereby posts were reallocated so as to preserve feeding and providing water for pilgrims for the sons of Abdul Manaf, while An-Nadwa house, the flag, and the doorkeeping of Al-Kaaba were maintained for the sons of Abdul Dar. The sons of Abdul Manaf, however, cast the lot for their charge and consequently left the charge for food and water giving to Hashim bin Abdul Munaf, whose death the charge was taken over by a brother of his called Abdul Muttalib bin Abdul Manaf, and afterwards by Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim, the Prophet's grandfather, whose son assumed this position until the rise of Islam, during which Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib was in charge. Many other posts were distributed among people of Quraysh for establishing the pillars of the new democratic petite state with the government offices and councils similar to those of today. Enlisted as follows are some of these posts. Casting the lots for the idols was allocated to Bani Jumah, noting of offers and sacrifices, settlement of disputes and relevant issues were to lie in the hands of Bani Sahm. Consultation was to go to Bani Asad, organization of blood money and fines was with Bani Tayyim, bearing of the national banner was with Bani Umayyah, the military institute, footmen and cavalry would be Bani Makhzum's responsibility. Bani Adi would function as foreign mediators. And now we go into the rulership of Pan Arabia, which I believe is the last one. Yeah. So, rulership in Pan Arabia. We have previously mentioned that the Qahtanite and the Adnanite emigrations and division of Arabia between these two tribes, those tribes dwelling near Heerah were subordinate to the Arabian king of Heerah, while those dwelling in the Syrian semi-desert were under domain of the Arabian Ghassanide king, a sort of dependency that was in reality formal than actual. However, those living in the Hind deserts enjoyed full autonomy. These tribes, in fact, had heads chosen by the whole tribe, which was a demi-government based on tribal solidarity and collective interest in defense of land property. Heads of tribes enjoyed dictatorial privileges similar to those of kings, and were rendered full obedience and subordination in both war and peace. Rivalry among cousins for rulership, however, often drove them to outdo one another in entertaining guests, affecting generosity, wisdom, and chivalry for the sole purpose of outranking their rivals and gaining fame among the people, especially poets, who were the official spokesmen at the time. Heads of tribes and masters had special claims to spoils of war, such as the quarter of the spoils, whatever he chose for himself or found in his way back, or even the remaining indivisible spoils. The political situation. The three Arab regions adjacent to foreigners suffered great weaknesses and inferiority. The people were either masters or slaves, rulers or subordinates. Masters, especially the foreigners, had claim to every advantage. Slaves had nothing but responsibilities to shoulder. In other words, arbitrary autocratic rulership brought about encroachment on the rights of subordinates. Ignorance, oppression, iniquity, injustice, and hardship, and turning them into people groping in darkness and ignorance. Fertile land which rendered its fruits to the rulers and men of power to extravagantly dissipate on their pleasures and enjoyments, whims and desires, tyranny and aggression. The tribes living near these regions were fluctuating between Syria and Iraq, whereas those living inside Arabia were disunited and governed by tribal conflicts and racial and religious disputes. They had neither a king to sustain their independence nor a supporter to seek advice from or depend upon in hardships. The rulers of Hijaz, however, were greatly esteemed and respected by the Arabs, and were considered as rulers and servants of the religious center. Rulership of Hijaz was in fact a mixture of secular and official precedents as well as religious leadership. They ruled among the Arabs in the name of religious leadership, and always monopolized the custodianship of the holy sanctuary and its neighborhood. They looked after the interests of the Kaaba visitors and were in charge of putting Ibrahim's code into effect. They even had such offices and departments like those of the parliaments of today. It's pretty interesting, actually. However, they were too weak to carry their heavy burden, as this evidently came to light during the Abyssinian invasion. So, that is the completion of the world before the Prophet, and what it was like before the Prophet was born, or I guess coming close to the times of the Prophet was born. And it's honestly pretty interesting. I mean, there's different types of wars, different tribes falling, tribes gaining power, and it was also pretty interesting to see like how the Kaaba was involved in all of this, and who was protecting the sacred house. The I guess disputes that came left, right, and center. So that's pretty interesting. And next time we will go through the beliefs and what people were actually practicing before the time of the Prophet. And you will see that it was not that close to Islam at all. There were some, in summary, there were good and bad things about it. But you will see that it's very much different to what we practice today, or until the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came to establish the correct ruling. But if you would like to, I guess, see the rest of that, then please don't forget to tune in for the next episode, inshallah, where we'll be covering that. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, and if you have any questions, definitely put them in the comments and we'll attend to them. And we'll see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
محمد رسول الله والذين معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانا سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود